I want to start by saying this. Today we recognize the National Coal Council's 30 years of continued service to the nation. While we acknowledge that constancy, we also like to note some new things. There's actually quite a lot new going on out here. First, again, I want to thank John as his last meeting chairing the council. We've really enjoyed working with you, and we also look forward to forming a close relationship with the new chairman who you'll select later today. I'd also like to draw some attention to the council's new membership drive. A number of you here are actually new members. We're grateful. Welcome. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your continuing members for your service as well. There's also a new study, which we're going to hear from Fred in just a little bit. This is on the nation's coal fleet today. Fred will present that after my talk, and I look forward to reading it. And, you know, there's also a new study which was proposed by the Secretary for a DOE sequestration program. It's working to the Secretary for his consideration. Hopefully that'll hit the board soon. So thank you again. Thanks to the whole team for delivering this particular study in record time. And we know it was a heavy lift. I know a lot of you here were involved in pulling today's study together, and thank you for doing that. In the line of things that are new, we also have a relatively new energy secretary. Since last year's meeting, Secretary Moniz has stepped in, and for the first time in a long time, we have a secretary who really understands fossil energy, and he sees it as a major component to the clean energy future. Moreover, there is a new Deputy Assistant Secretary for Clean Coal. That's me, and I'm glad to be here. I'm lucky to be serving on his team, but the Secretary and I look forward to continuing to build our relationship with you all in the National Coal Council. I, for one, have been having a blast. I just came back from visiting the National Carbon Capture Center at Plant Gaston in Alabama. And after that, I went to Plant Bowen in Georgia. It's just awesome. It is awesome to see the National Coal Council, the National Carbon Capture Center functioning so well, and the good work the Southern Company and the whole team there are doing. And they're delivering key data to scientists, to engineers, investors, decision makers, and that information is being shared around the world. I've also visited China twice in my new capacity. I've been working the job for 7 months. I've been to China twice. I'm going back again in July. I'm going back again in September. It's just what's required these days. And we look forward to continuing to work with China and other countries in what we're trying to do. Not surprisingly, I'm working with Assistant Secretary Chris Smith, who spoke here last year, with the whole DOE team. We're in the process of pulling together our draft 2016 budget. I know many of you here are interested in this, so watch this space. Hopefully we'll have information that can be shared broadly soon. We also have 2 new budget lines, which is, again, marvelous. One of these is on rare earth elements. We have $15 million in the omnibus budget to look at harvesting rare earth elements from coal and coal byproducts. We also have a new line on energy and water. This is the first DOE office that actually has this line. And one of the things I learned at Plant Gaston the other day, I'm sorry, not Plant Gaston, at Plant Bowen the other day, this stunned me. The amount of water that comes out of that smokestack every year is equal to the amount of all the bottled drinking water in the United States. It is a huge volume of water that comes out of these plants. And it's interesting to think if we can start working towards a world where these are viewed as positive sources of water for its constituents and people around the country. Before I get into the meat of my remarks, I'd like to take a moment, pause on the National Coal Council's 30th anniversary here. For 30 years, the Coal Council has provided expert advice and guidance on a broad range of coal-related policy issues, everything from technology to the social impact of coal use. Representing the broad diversity of coal interests, from industry to engineers to experts to academia, you guys have been the go-to guys. It's really worked, and you've been the go-to guys for 5 presidents and 10 secretaries. And because you have always been counted on to provide this solid, reliable, balanced analysis and counsel, you've earned the respect of successive administrations. And well done. The policymakers you advise and the industry you represent salute, again, the effort that you have here. The challenges have changed over the past 30 years. In the mid-'80s, as you know, we were all concerned about acid rain and sulfur emissions and NOx. We were making progress on reducing sulfur in those emissions. By the time the National Coal Council had formed, compared to the 70s baseline, we'd already improved emissions by 25%. But the National Coal Council was there, and it was in the forefront in what became the effort to demonstrate and commercialize an earlier generation of clean coal technologies. And there was this call for low-emission coal. Since then, We've had 88% reduction in SOx, 82% reduction in NOx, 96% reduction in PM10, and we did that while doubling coal generation in the country. It was a massive, massive, massive achievement, and we're still doing really important work today. Last week, the administration released the government's National Climate Assessment, and it shows that climate change is not something that could happen down the road, but it's happening right now, and it's happening right here. And it's being driven substantially by the release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and coal-fired power plants and all fossil energy systems contribute to that. So, just as we cut the Gordian knot on acid rain and sulfur reduction in the 80s, I am excited about the opportunities that we have to tackle this very real environmental challenge of the 21st century. For us to be successful, though, we need to look for opportunities to work more closely together, and we have a great opportunity now. If you could go forward here. We live in a time of energy abundance, and particularly we live in a time of fossil energy abundance. According to the EIA, coal use in the United States is up last year, and that's good news. Amazingly, not only is America the Saudi Arabia of coal, as it's been described forever, the US EIA predicts that next year we're going to surpass both Russia and Saudi Arabia in oil production. Turns out we're the Saudi Arabia of everything. The big story, of course, is gas. And if you can just click a couple of slides forward here. The big story, of course, is gas. The shale revolution has driven the fantastic growth in domestic energy supplies over the last half-decade. The U.S. is now poised to become a net exporter of natural gas. That's a shift that's having profound impacts on global markets and, dare I say, global politics. And not only markets, by switching to gas, in 2012, the U.S. saw CO2 emissions drop to their lowest level since 1994. While those of you who sell coal may not see all the pluses in this that I do see pluses. This has bought us time that we need. It has bought us 10 years to develop and deploy advanced fossil energy technology, including advanced coal conversion technology and CCS. So looking at the big picture, we see a nation that has an abundance of natural energy resources, and it's a phenomenon that is driving business development, it's driving job growth, and the creation of wealth. It's buying us the money that we need to develop technology. It's buying us the opportunity and the time that we need. Now, when you create wealth, you build things. And this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build things. It includes building better technology to harness these problems or to address tough issues like climate change. So by harnessing this energy abundance, we can create wealth, actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions at the same time. This cannot be emphasized enough, really. It's important to understand that the fundamentals of global climate change are very strong. And the National Climate Assessment shows they're observable now. A few of the findings from the assessment, U.S. average temperatures increased by 1.3 to 1.9 degrees since the past 100 years. Almost all that increase happened since 1970. Part of the reason why, by the way, is because we started scrubbing the sulfur out. The sulfur had been masking the greenhouse gas effects. When we reduced the sulfur, the sulfur was a cooling agent in the atmosphere. When we scrubbed the sulfur, it actually created that stronger pulse. The most recent decade was the nation's and the world's hottest on record, 2012 being the hottest year on record in the continental United States. Temperatures are projected to rise another 2 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit in most of the United States just over the next few decades. Not over the next century, over the next few decades, say over the next 2 or 3 Senate cycles. But what about the idea that, sun activity, solar flares or something have caused this? Well, we have satellites and sensors in space. They've measured the sun's output with great accuracy. There has been no increase in solar activity in the last half century, none. They also show that the middle troposphere is warming and the upper troposphere and the stratosphere are cooling. This was a direct prediction of climate researchers in the 70s. They said if global climate change due to greenhouse gas emissions is real, the lower and middle troposphere will heat and the upper troposphere and stratosphere will cool. That prediction has been borne out by 40 different kinds of data. In fact, multiple lines of independent evidence consist that human activities are the main cause of global warming over the past 50 years. And just yesterday, I never thought I'd see this. This is gobsmacking. We're seeing real-time measurable isostatic uplift in Antarctica due to rapid retreat of ice. The entire continent is raising because ice is melting. Real-time continent-scale isostatic rebound. As a geoscientist, it's awesome, but it's alarming. This is one of the many unprecedented and unexpected discoveries of our rapidly changing world. These robust technical findings won't go away. I want to say that again. The robust technical findings don't go away. What's the key point to this? Man-made climate change is real, it's serious, it's happening, and it's going to get worse. There's plenty of details to argue. How bad will it be? How fast? Where? When? But it's not just the view of most climate scientists. It also is the view of all three branches of the United States government. Largely the view of the financial community and the insurance industry. And that's the prism through which these decisions in investment and decisions in regulation are being made. The administration has developed a response to climate change. We'll go forward here. We've got the President's Climate Action Plan. This is designed to make sure that we can use all of our energy resources in a way that is sensible and sustainable. The plan basically has three pillars: mitigation, reduce our emissions dramatically through clean energy technologies, including nuclear, renewable, clean coal, CCS, and efficiency. It actually specifically calls out coal with CCS and CCUS really in the center of the document. I'm not kidding around, it's like in the center of the document. Second is adaptation. We have to prepare our domestic infrastructure for climate change impacts that we're already starting to feel. These are already baked in. One of the things that I learned when I was in Georgia last week, that the Southern Company's effort to create the Water Research Institute was prompted by incredible droughts in 2005 that threatened the coal-fired power plant's function. And they realized they needed to come up with better technologies and a better plan to manage that kind of challenge. If those challenges become more common or more acute, then in fact we need to create that kind of resilient response. Finally, international cooperation. We have to work globally to share and promote the use of renewable energy, energy conservation, and emissions-reducing measures, including advanced coal technologies and clean coal with CCS. So, if you look at the facts, there's basically two facts that govern our world. One of them is that coal supplies continue and will continue to supply an enormous part of the energy production in the United States and around the world for the foreseeable future, period. That is also not debatable. Coal is cheap, it's abundant, it's stable, it's easy to ship, it's the foundation of reliable power in this country, period. We're seeing dramatic growth in coal use pretty much everywhere else. We're seeing dramatic increases in coal use in Europe as they close nuclear plants, as they hit intermittency challenges. They're ramping up coal use in Eastern Europe and in Central Europe. Also in Japan, in the wake of Fukushima Daiichi, they're building more gas plants and more coal plants as the nuclear plants shut down. We're seeing that in China. I don't need to tell anybody here about this. We're seeing that in India. Coal use continues to grow. Coal use continues to be the backbone of the energy infrastructure of most nations. Coal, however, is also a major source of carbon dioxide emissions. In 2012, roughly 20% of power-related U.S. emissions in this country came from coal. In the United States, together in China, we're half of global CO2 emissions. Just two countries, where the largest fraction of that is coal. 50% of coal use around the world comes from China. That's a substantial portion of their emissions profile. So the bottom line is this: because it's abundant, affordable, and widely used to meet our energy demands, coal must remain a part of our energy mix. Coal must remain a part of our energy mix. At the same time, we have to reduce carbon dioxide emissions from coal. Not just coal, from gas too, from oil too, from all fossil sources, from biofuels, wherever we can get it. So that means that when it comes to coal, also natural gas, we have to aggressively implement the first pillar of the Climate Action Plan here, which is mitigation. That means we have to develop and deploy commercial CCUS technologies as widely and as broadly as we can. That's not simply the view of the administration. The scientific community and key members of the environmental community broadly support the notion that CCS is the critical technology to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. In fact, just yesterday, the International Energy Agency released a report stating that the growth of coal-fired power generation is unsustainable without carbon capture and sequestration technology. They also state that CCUS will account for about 1/6 of the CO2 reductions in 2050. So CCS is the sine qua non technology of any CO2 mitigation strategy. It's not a magic bullet, it won't solve all our climate problems, but it is needed and it will help. And the good thing is, we know it works. We know it works. There are many credible pathways to deploy CCS, pre-combustion, post-combustion, oxy-firing. We can do it for enhanced oil recovery, saline aquifers. We can increase the efficiency of our coal-fired systems, reduce the cost. There's hybrid systems, there's novel phase change systems. We aren't confined to a one-size-fits-all approach. As you know, many of you who are plant operators or have plant operators as customers, each plant has its own exigencies. Each plant has its own operational characteristics. So we are blessed in that this technology can be operated and brought forward in so many different ways. I do want to be clear, though, on one point. Government can't nor should it do it all. Our nation has a history of mobilizing its financial, material, and intellectual resources in partnership between private energy and public sector good to meet the challenge. We did it in World War II. We did it with the Marshall Plan. We did it with the Apollo program. We did it in the 80s and 90s when we tackled our serious pollution problems here in this room. Because America remains great, we can and will and must do great things. And we're doing great things when it comes to CCS. Let me talk just a little bit here about the DOE's program and what we're trying to do to drive down the cost of carbon capture technology and surmount the barriers to commercial deployment. Bottom line is we're working really hard to overcome all of the barriers, the technical, financial, and regulatory challenges to CCS. And we're going to harness the CO2 from coal for beneficial use wherever we can. Things that you all outlined in your 2011 and 2012 reports. And this is directed towards making CCS a turnkey commercial operation at 1/3 the cost by 2030. That's the goal. Top of the list are 8 large demonstration projects. They're proceeding nationwide. They are selected on 2 important bases. First, the likelihood of commercial success, and the second, covering a wide set of national needs. We have industrial and power projects, saline and EOR, pre-post and oxy-fired projects, polygeneration, making ethanol, making methanol, a very wide array of projects. And there have been important advances on these projects. For those of you who haven't necessarily been tracking all of them, the Air Products project was stood up last year. We've hit our 1 million ton mark. We've injected 1 million tons of carbon dioxide that we're going in the atmosphere, and now it's making domestic oil in the United States. In Mississippi, construction on Kemper is basically done. It's generating power right now using gas. They've started pressurizing and heating up the gasifier and expect to turn that on soon. We're still on track to have the plant commissioned some point soon, either end of this year or early next year. NRG Petronova has announced they're proceeding to financial close, and they expect to start the plant retrofit this summer. We also have the 2 first ever Class 6 permits in the country, one for Archer Daniels Midland, one for FutureGen. And we expect both of those permits to be fully and irrevocably granted in September. For the record, if you look at NRG Petronova, they did something remarkable with their project. I want to touch back on that in a minute. We gave them money for a 60 megawatt project. They looked at the financials and said, you know what, let's do a 240 megawatt project instead. And they did that without asking for any more federal money. They quadrupled the size, they asked for no money, then they stated publicly that they were able to do the next project without government support because they figured out how to do 20 or 30% savings on the project already. And they're considering doing 2 more projects on their own, retrofitting boilers 4 and 5 in that plant. Last month, I was also honored and had the privilege of attending the groundbreaking for the warm glass cleanup system demonstrated at TECO, at the Tampa Electric's pulp plant. What happened there is going to open up a whole new world for those kinds of plants, for places where we actually have gasifiers and we're going to do carbon capture and storage. This is going to be by far the cheapest way to go. We're really enthusiastic about it. It's going to make syngas cleanup cheaper. It's going to drive down those costs for carbon capture, and it's going to make it much easier for polygeneration and for beneficial use of carbon dioxide. All that's going to help roll out commercial deployment. And these projects represent the progress we're making in CCS. We're building projects. We're pouring concrete, and we're bending rebar. And we're showing practical, real-world applications of what we're doing in the lab. And we're learning by doing, and we're demonstrating what we know. It's obvious, but it's worth emphasizing that all this is possible because of the commitment of people in this room, commitment of industry, academia, and government. And for the record, the Obama administration has demonstrated its commitment to this technology in a number of real ways, not the least of which is funding. Since and including the 2009 Recovery Act, the administration's committed $6 billion to demonstration deployment of CCUS. Most of that is funding those 8 projects I just talking about, but a lot of it has gone to our core R&D programs, including things like the regional partnerships. On top of that, we have the $8 billion in loan guarantees for advanced fossil energy systems. Those are aimed at reducing CO2, methane, other greenhouse gases. It covers technologies for carbon capture. It covers advanced resource development, low carbon power systems, advanced conversion systems, and efficiency improvements. Together, these programs represent $14 billion investment in climate mitigation, all with the goal of enabling the use of fossil fuels, featuring coal, in a carbon-constrained world. Now, moving the ball down the field means that we have to do more. Many of you are familiar with our R&D program. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. We're working on gasifications, working on turbines, supercritical CO2 cycles, advanced ultra-supercritical cycles, advanced materials, fuel cells, and of course, carbon capture and storage. In particular, we're looking at high-efficiency oxy-combustion, things like chemical looping, as well as more conventional kinds of oxy-combustion. And we're doing this advanced carbon capture R&D to drop the cost and improve the performance for pre-combustion, post-combustion capture technologies. That's what we're doing on the capture side. On the storage side, of course, we've learned a lot in the past decade. We've really made an immense amount of progress, in no small part because of the DOE's success with the 7 regional partnerships. Again, thank you all for the outstanding work that's happened there. They're really taking a lead on this, and they've advised local governments, they've advised regional governments on the information that they need to know to make this a commercial turnkey enterprise. We've painstakingly thought of ways to share that information, to get it to the widest possible audience. So we've created a couple of knowledge-sharing tools. Many of you here are familiar with NatCarb, which is run now out of West Virginia University under the auspices of Dr. Tim Carr. But we've also created a new tool, the Energy Data Exchange, which is managed by NATL. This is another thing that's new. EDX. Y'all should go to the website and check it out. It's awesome. We're growing that platform, and in fact, we're trying to make that a core data sharing platform for the entire Department of Energy. And we're working across the different offices to inform them about the work we're doing with EDX and the kind of information that it can provide. Now, while progress is promising so far, we still face real challenges to CCS commercialization. You all know that just as well as I. On the technical side, we need to continue to tackle capture costs and storage risks. As I've pointed out, we are working hard on these issues. But there is still too much uncertainty when it comes to the regulatory environment. There's too much uncertainty when it comes to market mechanisms around CCS. And a lot of what we're doing in storage projects can help policymakers as they wrestle with these issues. So decision-making will take some time still. On top of that, we need to do a better job of public outreach. Again, many of you here are directly involved in that. We're grateful for that work. We have to reach out to people so that they have a good understanding based on the latest science of what CCS is and how it performs. And of course, there are regulations impacting the use of coal. These regs and the EPA's most recent CO2 rule underscore the importance of clean coal technologies, in particular CCUS. Now again, I understand why many in the industry have concerns about these regulations. I really do. I understand why you have these concerns. I would, however, like to share an observation from a former secretary. If we can get that up here. Next slide. Oh, before we do, this is a good time to be talking about this. You went to a party 10 years ago and nobody could spell sequestration? You know, now we're front page news, literally. And this is excellent time to be proactive on this account. But I want to share this quote from you. If you'll hit me the next slide here. I want to read this for you. This country takes a backseat to no one in the protection of our environment. We have a Clean Air Act. It's working. The coal industry has responded to its requirements, and together as a nation, we have achieved a reduction in air pollution that is unmatched by any other country. There is no reason why that trend should not continue. We have the technology. This is not a quote from Hazel O'Leary or Bill Richardson or Sam Bodman. This is from John Harrington at your first meeting. This was Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Energy, speaking at the very first National Coal Council meeting. So things have changed over the past 30 years, but some things remain constant. Fast forward now, we can say that we have achieved a real reduction in pollutions of all kinds. That is not a small deal. It is a huge deal. It should be trumpeted. It should be sung from the mountaintops. And just take a look at what we did through technology development on SOx, on NOx, on particulates. You know, this took place, again, as we were basically doubling coal. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, technology has played a key role in overcoming all these challenges. We stand poised to do the same with carbon emissions. There is no reason why that trend should not continue, none. Indeed, it must. to maintain the long-term financial and operational viability of coal as the backbone of our power systems. So we have a track record of meeting real challenges with technology. Working together, we're going to do it again. Because we have the technology that will help us meet the challenge of coal and respond to our future. What we need today, though, as much as we needed it earlier, when we tackled earlier challenges, we need the positive engagement of industry, of academia, of decision makers and investors to the EPA's regulations under the Clean Air Act. What I mean is, instead of pushing back, push forward. Work with the EPA. Weigh in on new source performance standard regulation. Try to make it better. Our experience, my experience, has been the EPA is eager to have your perspective and constructive engagement. It's likely that they will welcome the same for the draft existing source performance standards as well, which, as you know, will be released in June. Help. Make them better. Because I believe that coal can and must have a place in a carbon-constrained world. Actually, let me be more explicit. We need coal in a carbon-constrained world. We need coal in our energy mix. That said, climate change is real. This is not a political issue. This will not go away with future administrations or future Congresses. It will be here, and it is here, and it will change the energy market and the way that we do business. So the coal industry must be proactive and aggressive in adapting to these fundamentals of America's lifestyle and market. How? The way you always have. Another quote from Secretary Harrington at the first Coal Council meeting. The past few years have been uncertain ones for the coal industry, perhaps as tough as any in your long history. I think the industry realizes today that it's going to have to work harder than ever to stay in step with changing market realities. His faith in our industry's determination to meet the challenges was not misplaced. It's with that same faith and optimism that I encourage you to work harder than ever to stay in step with today's changing market realities. For our part, the Department of Energy will continue to work closely with you to develop and deploy the cost-effective clean coal technologies we can, like CCS. We will carry on that important work with passion and commitment and as much money as we have. We hope you'll do the same. And we will continue to seek and value the National Coal Council's input and the constructive partnership as we seek towards our shared goal to ensure that coal has a strong future in a carbon-constrained world. Thank you, and again, congratulations for an outstanding 30 years of work.